The most powerful type of person. Nietzsche explains, a demon appears in the quiet of your room at 3 in the morning and whispers, "This life, as you are living it and have lived it, you will live once more and innumerable times more." Would you collapse at the weight of that sentence? Or would you answer, "You are a god, and never did I hear anything more divine"? Nietzsche thought that question was the heaviest weight you could place on a human soul. Not a moral exam, not a courtroom verdict, but a stress test for your spirit. The answer reveals your power. Not the power to command others, but the power to bear reality and to want it again. Ask yourself, who is the most powerful type of person? Our age is quick with answers. The billionaire who buys a coastline and names it after himself. The general whose decisions move borders like furniture. The influencer who can turn a sentence into a trend before breakfast. Nietzsche looked away from these glittering puppets and listened for something deeper than applause. Power for him was not the number of bodies you could move, but the fullness of soul that could move you when all applause falls silent. It was an intensity, a density, a pressure in the marrow. It was the will to power so, often caricatured as domination, understood as an inner law of life, the impulse to expand, to reinterpret, to shape, to overcome. If you have ever watched a strong person avoid the truth they know, you have seen weakness disguised as strength. If you have ever watched a quiet person walk into a room where their old world ends and decline to plead their case, you have seen a variety of power that is almost invisible. Nietzsche went hunting for that species. He believed the rarest power is not the ability to possess others, but the ability to give style to one's character, to craft a self capable of saying yes to what is hard, violent, unfair, beautiful, and fleeting in existence. Power as artistic self-legislation, not as bureaucracy. Power as hospitality to fate, not as superstition that forces fate to be polite. He distrusted the morality of his time, not because he wanted cruelty, but because he thought its gentleness was a mask for something vindictive. Behind the language of meekness, he heard resentment, the slow venom of the weak who cannot strike, converting their failure into a virtue and calling it justice. Resentment moralizes what it cannot overcome. It invents a world where power is vice and impotence is purity. It tells a comforting story. The powerful are evil, and the rest of us are good. Nietzsche's scandalous suggestion is simple. That story kills the desire to become strong in the only sense that matters. It teaches you to prefer accusation to transformation. It makes you feel moral while you stay small. Here is his counter-proposal. The most powerful type of person is the one who can affirm life without editing it to flatter their sensitivities. Not because they are blind to pain, but because they metabolize pain into form, into art, into courage. They are creators of value in a world where values once came from heaven. The old tables have been shattered. We are moderns. We don't believe our gods. We simply inherit their customs. The powerful type does not settle for inheritance. They write new commandments on the air and then live them until others can read. This person is not born in a palace. They are born in the desert that appears when the old meaning fails. Nietzsche mapped the desert and left markers. He called them metamorphoses of the spirit, the camel who kneels to take on heavy loads and learns to bear. The lion who roars no to old authority, destroys the dragon of thou shalt, and carves out the right to create. And the child, a new beginning, a holy yes, a playful innocence that can finally create values instead of reacting to them. The child is not naivete. It is the hardest thing. It is the dancer who floats above abysses with laughter, because they have already crossed them and returned with lighter feet. Do you feel the gate that closes around your heart when you hear the word power? That is our inheritance. We have been taught to fear it. To assume it is predation. Nietzsche did not worship predators. He admired intensity that overflowed into generosity, the kind of strength that can give because it does not fear losing itself. He saw saints of strength as much as warriors. A composer who writes a symphony that teaches strangers how to breathe. A scientist who sacrifices his reputation for a dangerous truth. A teacher who forms a soul instead of manufacturing a conformist. Dominance is vulgar and easy. It is the tantrum of the unformed. Formation is brutal and beautiful. It produces a being who no longer requires the humiliation of others to feel expansive. The test returns. Imagine the demon again, smiling in the dark. What life would you need to live so that you could say yes to its endless return? Not what house, not what status. What kind of soul? Nietzsche thought the supreme power was the ability to love necessity, to say, amor fati, I do not merely accept, I love my fate. This is a frightening sentence if you were taught that love is a feeling for the pleasant. He meant the kind of love that can include the ugly and still not become ugly in reply. He meant a courage that can stare at the structure of existence, its waste, its cruelty, its indifference, and still write a melody worth living by. Watch his own life for a clue. Sick, poor, ridiculed, largely unread while alive, he wrote as if writing were a form of war and a form of dancing. He did not become powerful by being obeyed. He died in a small rented room. He became powerful by becoming a measure, a standard against which we can weigh ourselves, a lightning rod that still attracts storms. His power is in his yes to a life that offered him very few favors, and in his refusal to let bitterness become his theology. You can feel a tremor in the way he speaks about freedom. Not the freedom of choices laid out on a menu, but the freedom to promise. He imagined a sovereign individual, not sovereign because he owns property, but because he owns himself enough to say, I will do this tomorrow, and I can trust myself to keep it. In a world of soft obligations and faster forgetfulness, this is revolutionary. The most powerful person is the one who can make a promise to their future without hating the present that must pay for it. So we begin with a paradox that will not leave you alone. Power is not what you can get others to do. Power is what you can get yourself to live with. It is the score you write for your days, and the discipline to perform it when nobody is listening. It is the ability to face the ugliest truth about your motives and not faint. It is the willingness to be misunderstood because your fidelity is to the work, not the applause. This is not a lifestyle. It is a training. Nietzsche will not clap for your affirmations. He will ask whether you can dance after drinking the hemlock of your most honest insight. There is an ancient fear in you that if you allow yourself to become powerful in this way, you will become monstrous. Nietzsche's reply is cruel and kind. You already are, in fragments. Only the whole person can be trusted. Fragmented weakness is capable of infinite harm because it needs masks and crowds to live. Integrated strength can afford tenderness because it does not borrow its worth from witness. The most powerful type of person is therefore also the most dangerous to every lazy arrangement in their own soul. They will burn their old comforts to keep the new hearth warm. Stand at the edge of this idea and look down. The abyss returns your gaze. You can retreat into the warm house of heard opinions, or you can stay long enough to realize the abyss is not a sentence, but a mirror. Nietzsche's question persists. Do you want to live a life you can love again? If yes, the work begins in the only place that can authorize it, the laboratory of your own becoming. There are no preachers here. There are intentions and experiments. There is failure, and then the decision to do something more ancient than hope, to become stronger in a way that makes strength beautiful. Start with suspicion, not of others, but of the parts of you that grow righteous when they are afraid. Nietzsche's genealogical knife does not cut to humiliate. It cuts to reveal the stitching beneath our moral clothes. He asks, where did your values come from? You will say, from reason, from God, from progress, from nature. He will say, from needs, from instincts, from victories and defeats, disguised as commandments. Morality, as we inherited it, is not a pure code delivered by angels. It is a battlefield burial, a priestly rewrite of warrior songs, a reshaping of the world in the image of those who could not conquer it by spear, and so conquered it by guilt. This is the suspense at the center of his thinking. What if your conscience is not an oracle, but a training? What if the voice telling you to play small is not the voice of goodness, but the aftertaste of a long historical revenge? Nietzsche diagnoses a subterranean war, master morality and slave morality. One is born from strength, from pride in qualities that overflow courage, generosity, readiness to risk. The other is born from weakness that makes a doctrine of safety, humility, compliance, equality, shrunk to sameness. He calls the second resentment, raised to metaphysics. You can hear the insult, but listen for the caution. Resentment is not a moral failure. It is a psychological condition that produces a moral worldview. It turns inability into a halo. It whispers, we couldn't climb the mountain no one should climb. The climbers are wicked. There is comfort in that whisper. There is also decay. He is not making a theology out of cruelty. He is making an anatomy out of fear. Consider the priestly type in his story, the one who cannot strike in the daylight, so he makes midnight a religion. He invents sign where there was simply appetite. He calls strength arrogance to equalize the field. He weaponizes pity, not because he loves the suffering, but because suffering makes the strong uncomfortable. This peculiarly modern pity does not heal. It produces dependence, and then calls their dependence compassion success. Nietzsche wants to rescue pity from sentimentality. If your pity robs people of the dignity to transform, it is vanity dressed as kindness. The powerful type in his picture does not pity in a way that keeps people weak. They invite risk, model endurance, reward courage. He presses the question in closer. Are your ideals a strategy? Does your meekness buy a safety you do not want to admit? Do you store grievances like treasure because they make meaning in a life you refuse to lead? When he talks about the herd, he does not mean the poor, the many, the infamous. He means the instinct in each of us that prefers warmth to weather, agreement to reality, slogans to thought. The herd does not ask what is true. It asks what will keep the circle intact. The herd is terrified of heights and calls the mountain immoral. The herd turns mediocrity into a shrine and asks you to leave flowers. Into this soft winter, he introduces a wind, the last man. This creature is what you get when comfort becomes metaphysics. He blinks. He has invented little happiness's warm room, good hygiene, excellent entertainment, and he congratulates himself for being humane. He no longer believes in great love or great hatred. He no longer believes in great men or great works. He believes in precaution. He code switches in every environment and calls it tact. He feels superior because he has no enemies. In truth, he has no direction. The last man has survived all dangers by avoiding them, and his grandchildren will inherit his safety like anemia. Do you recognize him in the mirror sometimes? The last man is not a biography. It is a mood. It visits when you give up a demanding love for a manageable one, when you trade the book that would wound you for the feed that will anesthetize you, when you hedgehog your life into a ball of small pleasures. Nietzsche does not despise rest or reward. He despises a civilization that builds its cathedral out of cushions. The most powerful type cannot live there. They need difficulty like lungs need resistant air. They court the strenuous because it keeps them precise. Softness erodes edges. Soon you cannot cut anything, not even your own self-deception. At this point, the resistance to Nietzsche becomes moral disgust. Isn't he simply giving a golden sheen to brutality? This is where the story tightens. He writes about cruelty. Yes, especially a cruelty to oneself. Not sadism, but the severity a sculptor must show a block of marble. The powerful type has the courage to bleed for form. They cut away habits that made them likable. They risk misunderstanding. They accept solitude when necessary, because the work demands a weather that crowds cannot provide. Herd warmth can turn to herd frost when you leave the formation. If you require applause to think, you will never think anything the herd needs to hear. The hidden motive he suspects everywhere is the hunger for security. Not safety from random accident, but metaphysical insurance. Meaning that requires no effort. Morality that requires no nuance. Belonging that costs no truth. He disbelieves in such policies. He thinks they pay out in boredom and corrosion. He thinks the soul secretly longs to be tested, to lift a weight that makes the muscles tremble. Not because pain is holy, but because strength is a joy that cannot be bought any other way. The powerful type, in his story, is intoxicated by that joy. They are not adrenaline seekers. They are meaning seekers. Now he rearranges the crime scene of history. He looks at our loftiest ideals, equality, compassion, reason, and asks which part of the soul advertises them. He does not reject them. He refuses to let them go uninspected. Equality can be justice or jealousy. Compassion can be love or control. Reason can be clarity or swordplay that masks fear. The powerful type does not cling to an ideal like a passport. They test it like a tool and put it down when it does damage. In their hands, values are instruments, not gods. They are faithful to reality, not to slogans even their own. Surprise, he is not recommending warlords. He is recommending creators. The will to power is not a command to subjugate. It is an account of life's basic tendency to assert, to pattern, to interpret, to ascend. Plants reach, animals range. Minds organize. Artists shape. Scientists hypothesize. The powerful type embodies this tendency consciously. They don't merely adapt to circumstances. They reinterpret them into opportunity for thickness of self. They are ruthless only where sentimentality would make them false. They are gentle where cruelty would make them stupid. They are economical with their hatred, extravagant with their curiosity. This suspense builds toward a simple question. If you stripped the doctrines, the praise, the guilt, the manners, what would you still want? The most powerful type lives close to that wanting. They choose projects that fit their form, opponents who sharpen them, friends who demand their courage. They learn the anatomy of their energies. In them, contradiction ceases to be a scandal and becomes a resource. They can be severe without becoming cold, tender without becoming weak, playful without becoming trivial. They breathe at altitudes that make others dizzy, and they share their oxygen when it matters. Meanwhile, the rest of us move through familiar loops. We sign moral checks written by dead accountants. We inherit voices and mistake them for conscience. Nietzsche doesn't ask you to throw away your inheritance. He asks you to read the will aloud and decide what you accept. The powerful type does not live on hand-me-downs. They tailor. They refuse the jacket that makes them safe and suffocated. They buy a needle and start with their own name. It is a slow process. It is the only one that outlasts seasons. The turn arrives like mountain air. Power is creation. We think of power as capacity to constrain. Nietzsche dares us to think of it as capacity to generate, to overflow, in such a way that the world must adjust. Creation here is not limited to painting or composing. It is the primal act of setting a measure, deciding a tempo, giving style to one's character. This giving of style is not cosmetic. It is architecture. You select, you refuse, you emphasize, you polish. You are severe with your own mediocrity, not because you hate yourself, but because you love what you could be enough to be unkind to what keeps it small. Observe his 3 metamorphoses again, now as a recipe rather than a parable. The camel says, "Load me." It takes on disciplines, vows, truths that are heavy, not to break, but to build capacity. The lion says, "No." It confronts the dragon of foul shout with the glittering scales of 1,000 inherited values, on each scale a sacred rule. The lion roars its right to carve space, and then the child arrives, light and circular. This last metamorphosis is the hardest because it requires innocence after knowledge, play after war, affirmation after critique. The powerful type is not stuck in negation. They have the courage to stop fighting and start inventing. Self-overcoming is the engine. Notice the shape of the word. Not conquest of an enemy, but conquest of yesterday's self. It is the willingness to find in yourself the forces that oppose your highest aim, and to wrestle them without scorn. It is warfare as pedagogy. The powerful type does not merely win. They grow. Every obstacle becomes a rung on a ladder. Every humiliation becomes raw material. They do not waste what hurts them. They incorporate it into the musculature of their style. We think power is control. He thinks power is rhythm. The sovereign individual is the one who can promise, because they know their rhythm and can count on it. They have memory. Not only the memory of facts, but the deeper memory. The capacity to hold a commitment in the bloodstream until tomorrow. They are not ruled by appetite's weather. They can ride out storms of mood and keep the ship on course. This capacity is rare, and it produces the only kind of trust that matters. Self-trust that radiates outward into credible commitment. In such a person, obligation becomes joy because it harmonizes with their form. Eternal recurrence returns the heaviest thought not as a threat, but as a criterion. The question is no longer, could you bear it? But can you make it worth repeating? The powerful type composes a life that could be relived without resentment. Note the humility of this ambition. It does not require perfection or relentless happiness. It requires meaning so deep that even the wounds become legible. Amor fati, love of fate, is not romance with disaster. It is refusal to segregate your life into sacred and profane, meaningful and meaningless. The powerful type declines to treat misfortune as an argument against existence. They treat it as weight added to the barbell of their becoming. Nietzsche opposes the ascetic ideal, not because he hates discipline, but because he hates the hatred of life. The ascetic ideal is the worldview that makes abstinence into superiority, that defines spirituality by refusal. It is one way to endure suffering, by calling the world evil and rewarding ourselves with a morally scented victory. The powerful type chooses another route. They do not hide their resentments under robes. They sublimate turning impulses into artistry, aggression into precision, lust into generative tenderness, grief into gravity. Sublimation is not castration, it is orchestration. The conductor in them knows when to bring in the brass and when to quiet the percussion. Humor is a tell. Nietzsche's strong rarely snarl. They grin, sometimes wickedly, often lightly. He called for a laughter that kills. Yes, but kills what? Pomposity, false reverence, dead metaphysics. The powerful type does not speak in marble. They dance. They are allergic to solemnity that hides cowardice. They carry tragedy like a violin, an instrument for joy as well as lament. Tragic joy is their native climate, to feel the wound and still prefer the world that wounds to any anesthetized paradise. You will object. Isn't this simply a recipe for narcissists with good taste? No. Narcissism is hunger dressed as entitlement. It seeks mirrors, not worlds. The powerful type is a builder of worlds, which demands they transcend themselves. Their projects are bigger than their reflection. They can be generous because they are not in famine. Even their solitude is populated with problems to solve, futures to midwife, tasks that do not flatter. They do not collect admirers. They attract collaborators and enemies worth having. Nietzsche's great health appears here. Not the health of metrics, but the resilience of a system that can absorb crisis without losing its form. Great health means you are wide open to experience without rotting from exposure. It means you can read a book that offends you without becoming a weather vane. It means you can endure slow work without becoming mean. It means your nervous system knows the difference between danger and novelty and does not shriek at both. Such health is cultivated. It is paid for with sleep and sobriety of thought and deliberate frictions that keep your edges alive. Above all, a powerful type is a legislator of themselves first. They take the raw lawlessness of instinct and write a code that does not humiliate instinct but directs it. They do not live in rebellion forever. Rebellion is a bridge, not a home. The lion must become child. This legislative function extends into culture. Nietzsche dreams of creators who set new tables, not because they love control, but because the old tables have stopped feeding souls. New measures are scandalous. They feel like arrogance to the untrained ear. But listen longer. They are often liberated gratitude for life becoming possible again. We live in a civilization shrill with moral language and shy of greatness. Our heroes are brand compatible. The powerful type is bad at brands. Their silhouette does not fit in metrics. They are difficult to sell because they do not stabilize into one sensation. Today they are rigorous, tomorrow light, always in motion. Their consistency is of a deeper kind, consistency of aim. The long obedience of effort bends toward the same horizon even as their steps vary, reading, building, courting risk, recovering from mistakes without theatrics. They are not immune to humiliation. They are immune to being defined by it. A final instrument enters, forgetting. He calls it active forgetting, an intelligent power that clears space for newness. The weak remember slights for decades because resentment needs archive. The powerful remember selectively. They keep what furthers becoming. They let rot what would poison it. This is not denial. It is gardening. Memory without selection becomes swamp. Selection without memory becomes desert. The powerful keep a landscape. The cost is the currency that makes this more than aphorism. Power exacts solitude. The higher you climb, the thinner the air, the fewer the voices that can join you without gasping. Nietzsche does not romanticize this. He writes of deserts and peaks, of cold. He was a connoisseur of loneliness and knew its mutilations. He also knew that the worst loneliness is the crowded life where you never meet yourself. The powerful type is willing to endure the thinner air for the view that recompenses it, seeing farther, not to lord over others, but to orient the work and the heart. He speaks of a discipline that sounds like cruelty and is actually devotion. Give up certain comforts, not as a theater of virtue, but as an experiment. Discover what remains of you when the applause is removed. Fast from attention so you can feel hunger for truth. Expose yourself to thinkers who would scandalize your tribe. Travel, not to collect photographs, but to measure your nervous system against difference and teach it not to panic. The powerful type builds practices that get the soul in shape. Without ritual, ambition becomes weather. With it, you can withstand storms that would shatter softer vessels. And then there is the abyss, his favorite companion. He tells you to build your cities on the edge of it, not because he is morbid, but because he knows thinking becomes sterile in the suburbs of the mind. The edge concentrates you. It takes play seriously and seriousness lightly. You look down for an unflinching second and feel the vertigo of contingency. All could be otherwise. Then you step back with gratitude that it is not otherwise. Or if it must be, that you are agile enough to pivot. The abyss is a tutor in humility. It reproaches your certainty, not your courage. The powerful type speaks softly after the abyss. The bombast goes out of them. The resonance remains. Pain visits. Power does not forbid it. Fate does not negotiate. Illness comes, betrayal, loss, the weariness of decades. Weakness would like to make a metaphysics out of this. The world is wicked. The strong are liars. Nothing matters. The powerful type refuses the sweet poison. They suffer and do not alibi their suffering with a system that flatters them. They prefer the truth of a wound to the narcotic of grievance. If they criticize, it is surgical, not recreational. If they weep, they do not publish it. If they collapse, they do so in order to rise on a schedule they set while lying on the floor. Compassion returns in a new key. Not pity that numbs, but the generosity of someone who knows the cost and confront the bill. They expect from others what they expect from themselves. Honesty about motive, appetite for work, willingness to fail in public. They do not humiliate the fragile, but they do not let fragility govern. Their love is demanding because it believes in you. Their forgiveness is practical. It frees you to try again. It does not rewrite what happened. Their presence calms because they are not looking to you to stabilize their chaos. They bring a weather, and those around them steady to it. There is also delight, surprised, and unadvertised. The powerful type is not a grim ascetic. They are the ones who do not need to feign enthusiasm. They have built days they enjoy. They find comedy in their own seriousness. They taste with the whole mouth. They keep friendships with those who can laugh at them accurately. They are not suspicious of joy. They distrust only its counterfeits. Festivals are not breaks from life. They are the life that discipline makes possible. Work is not penance. It is the instrument that amplifies their love of the world. Amor fati glows brightest here. Imagine loving the necessity that limits you. Imagine thanking your constraints for sculpting you. Your body, your era, your temperament, your particular wound, these are not accidents to be ignored. They are the angles that make you singular. The powerful type does not waste years bargaining for a different instrument. They learn to play this one exquisitely. They obey reality with such intelligence that the obedience looks like authority. In a culture obsessed with options, they become masterful at making one thing inevitable: their aim. Against them crowds the last men with their blinking. He is not your enemy. He is your future if you diversify your attention until it dissolves. Look around. The rituals of triviality. The professionalized offense. The technologies that take your power of promise and replace it with a swipe. Nietzsche's warning is not Luddite panic. It is anthropological. Tools that lower thresholds can also lower souls, unless you build counterweights. The powerful type builds them. Long projects, slow languages, inconvenient obligations that stretch the horizon of their promise beyond what the algorithm recognizes as profitable. There is a precise loneliness in being misunderstood as cruel because you refuse anesthetics. Accept it. Let time vindicate your tenderness. If your severity makes you cold, you failed. If your severity makes you precise, you will know because love will trust you more, not less. You will become a place where people come to be told the truth without shame. You will become a kind of weather others visit to remember their own strength. Authority in this sense is not conferred by votes. It is conferred by the relief people feel when your presence untangles the knot they were pretending was a necklace. Look again at Nietzsche the man. Decades of pain, ruptured friendships, a final collapse into silence. This is not a Hollywood arc. It is a human one. We should be careful not to convert his life into a sermon. He is not a saint to imitate. He is a force to consult. He leaves a question burning on the desk of every person who would be powerful. Will you make your life worthy of recurrence? Not as metaphysics, but as criterion. If the answer is no, why? Which parts could not bear repetition? Are they accidents or your habits? If habits, what do you love that is purchased by keeping them? Name the purchase. Ask if it is worth the price. If you feel accused, good. Accusation can be a sacrament if it sends you to the right altar. Not the altar of apology theater, but the altar of revision. This is where the powerful type practices their hidden craft. They rewrite. They edit themselves with the care you would give a poem you hope to leave behind. They keep the metaphors that breathe, kill the lines that show off, and accept criticism from readers who love the poem more than your ego. The body is edited with sleep, sweat, silence. The day is edited with rare commitments. The life becomes a text that could be reread without nausea. Now stand quietly and try on a final thought. You are not asked to become a giant, only to stop choosing smallness with such devotion. The most powerful type of person is not a fantasy species. They are available in the choices you make this week. Nietzsche's demon has a signature. He visits in moments that look boring. Not at the TED Talk, not at the cliff's edge, but in the afternoon, when you choose whether to open a demanding book or scroll, whether to speak the rigorous sentence or the charming one, whether to keep a promise that no one will punish you for breaking. The greatness he advertises is not far away. It is the accumulation of unfashionable fidelities. Begin here. Keep one promise longer than your mood. Choose one practice that thickens you writing, training, language, craft, and shelter it from your own sabotage. Reduce your public speech by a third. Let silence accumulate friction around your words, so that when you use them, they strike true. Seek one adversary worthy of you, a thinker, a task, a craftsperson whose standard humiliates you into growth. Replace entertainment that leaves you emptier with art that leaves you heavier. If you must be on display, let it be the display of work, not of want. Test your loves with eternal recurrence. It is not a metaphysical doctrine you must swear to. It is a probe. If this day returned forever, would you be proud or sick? Adjust accordingly. Not with radical overhauls that smell of mania, but with brutal increments that don't care whether anybody notices. The powerful type does not announce their metamorphoses. They wake up to it in the middle of a sentence they once would have avoided. They catch themselves not fleeing. They sign their name to a task as if it mattered, because they have finally decided that it does. Guard against the counterfeit power that comes from being oppositional for sport. The lion is a stage, not a retirement plan. Do not let your rebellion calcify into identity. Burn what you must, your cowardice, your stale good boy morality, your charming cynicism, but do not become a pyromaniac who makes flame an excuse to avoid the quiet work of building. Create something that did not exist. A new habit of thought, a new form of tenderness, a sentence that cuts through, can't like a bell in fog. The most powerful type is a builder after they are a breaker. Will you be lonely? Yes. Will you be less lonely than you would be while surrounded by applause you do not respect? Also yes. Find your kin not by ideology, but by heat signature, the ones who are warmed by difficulty, who refuse gossip because they have work, who can be trusted with your ambition because they will not flatter it. Trade fewer words for deeper ones. Share work, not brand. Protect their solitude as you protect your own. Friendships at this altitude are not a network. They are alpine huts that keep you alive in storms. Practice active forgetting. Do not carry every slight up the mountain. Drop bags as you climb. Keep the equipment of memory that helps. Names, gratitude, craft lineage. Lose the archives of injury that transform you into a curator of old pain. If you need to be wounded to feel alive, you have chosen a poor god. The powerful type is not bored by peace. They make peace dense. They fill quiet with work and discernment until it hums. They are not excited by drama. They exploit it when it arrives, but they do not court it like an addict courts relapse. And keep play. Without play, you will freeze into a tyrant of the self, making virtue out of exhaustion. The child is the goal for a reason. Play is not frivolity. It is the proof that the spirit is unshackled. It is what creation feels like from the inside. Laugh at yourself. It is armor against fanaticism. Dance privately above your own abyss. When fear returns with his clipboard, stamp it and send him away. When seriousness insists on being worshipped, make it carry your bag. The world is tragic. Do not add to it by becoming humorless. A warning before we close. Herd morality will try to conscript you at every turn by calling your discipline pride and your severity cruelty. It will ask you to lower your standard in the name of love. Do not. Love rises to standards that are set in truth. Do not confuse approval with mercy. Do not confuse softness with kindness. Do not confuse loudness with strength. Your quiet will begin to threaten those who depend on noise to feel alive. Bless them. Do not argue with them. Your life will be your argument. One morning, the demon returns and finds you already awake. He repeats the old test. This life, again and again. You do not need to perform for him. You nod like someone who has been busy. You look around at a room that holds tools, not excuses. You think of the people you can promise, because you have promised yourself. You feel the ache in your legs from the climb, and you smile at the ache, because it is the receipt for something you wanted without envy. You picture the abyss, and then some ridiculous joke you heard on the trail. You answer him with a sentence that no longer sounds grand, only accurate. I would. If this answer feels out of reach, do not turn it into a banner you resent. Turn it into coordinates. Move 5 degrees today. Do not ask to be admired for it. Ask to be held to it by the part of you that will not sell you for comfort. Presume that meaning will not descend like weather. It will be built like a road, and you will be old when it opens, and children you will never meet or walk it to places you cannot imagine. This is power that does not require an audience to exist. It is sovereign even when no one knows your name. The world you inherit is loud, fast, and certain in its smallness. Your task is not to argue with it. Your task is to become a measure inside it, to hold yourself to a standard that humiliates laziness, starting with your own. To promise and keep your promise. To refuse the joy that makes you thinner. To love the day you're given enough to build a second one like it without bitterness. To write a life that could be repeated and still be a gift. If this opened your eyes, subscribe to Boring History, because the truth is never boring.